Howdy Humanities 4 Film Studies for Red Bluff campus, the hybrid that's half online, half in the classroom. Spring 73, uh, 23. Um, yeah, it's cold out there. It's a good thing. It's been a good winter. How's everybody doing? This is my first lecture. I'll try to keep it short and not too technical or boring. Maybe you're bored already. Anyway, did you get my announcements? Always, every week, every couple days, you should really look at the announcements because something will come up and I'll want you to look at it. And the announcements are what we're going to do, what I want you to look at. So I hope you saw the announcement to look at the film Trip to the Moon in modules. Look at that movie, take notes. I would, because on Monday we're going to talk about it in class. And I'm going to ask you the questions. Let's see if you could come up with some relatively interesting responses. I'm not saying you guys will have answers. It's probably freaking you out if you watch it because most of you have probably never seen a silent film, especially that early on in cinema. That's considered the first sci-fi film ever made. That's what they thought sci-fi should look like. Uh, were they that far off? How wrong were they? At least they were trying. Anyway, so take a look at Trip to the Moon. It's a 12-minute journey. It's kind of freakish and psychedelic journey, if you ask me. And but tell me what you think. When you write your essays, we're gonna break the film down like we're gonna break that film down on Monday. Why? Why does it look the way it looks? Why are the performers performing the way they're performing? Why is the camera where it is? Why is the story being told the way it is? What do you think is going on there? Um, please put some thought into it and have some interesting responses on Monday, okay? And then we'll move on from there. Um, Also, I posted a discussion. Simply introduce yourself, give some history of who you were, why you are, or who you are, or what's going on with you. Or if you don't want to share any of that, it's okay. Um, and then tell me what your relationships with movies, the class. Good, bad, indifferent. Do they mean anything? Do they mean nothing? Do you go to movies? Do you just watch them on a computer screen? What are you looking for in a movie? Or what aren't you looking for? Pardon my cough. Okay, today I want to just briefly go over putting the context of these films in the historical time they were made. So when you look at something like Trip to the Moon, you cannot put your modern thinking TikTok, sci-fi, Star Wars experience on that film. It was made 120 years ago, longer, and yeah, about 120 years ago, and that was their version of it. You think it might be silly or silly funny, but could you have predicted how it would look now? Marvel Comics is not sci-fi, by the way. That is fantasy fairy tale films. We'll be talking about those later. Um, but it's a changing landscape. And so when they made that film, 1903, I believe, the French filmmaker Millet made it, and he's known for being a revolutionary. He was the James Cameron, Steve Spielberg of his day, believe it or not. Um, and that was cutting edge stuff. What was going on in the culture? Now that's France, but 1903, the world was in the midst of an industrial age. We're going from horse-drawn buggies to automobiles. We're going from floating around in balloons to airplane travel soon. Not quite yet, but soon. In 13, 14 brief years, we're going to be in a World War I with airplanes and army tanks and machine guns. So the world is changing rapidly. We're going from Victoria era into a early modern era. Queen Victoria, who was the Queen of England, still had a large influence on lots of European cultures when it came to manners and style and religion and philosophies. And you see it in movies all the time. Um, if you watch any movies that are period pieces, you'll see what I'm talking about. Well, in a few short years, that's going to bust out into another era completely, um, which we'll be talking about in class later. But anyway, but right now things are pretty radical if you look at the film. I'm not kidding. Uh, they're not scientists, folks. They're wizards. You have to watch the film. We'll be talking about it. Why? Some questions for you. Why are the women in it all wearing short shorts? They're also the military. They've got the rifles. Interesting. And the men are old, gray-haired, old wizards like from Harry Potter. That's interesting. Also, that's probably what they thought scientists were doing. The magic of it all. Was it real? Was it science, or was it magic? So anyway, look at the culture because that's part of the humanities aspect of the class when these films are made. We're going to be talking about that this whole semester. Why why is it important to put the film in the context of the era it was built in? It's important, and and that's all part of it. Why they exist, why they matter, why we're still looking at the stuff all this over 120 years later. That's how important it is. Also, right now, you're looking at the collective storytelling. Humans have a desire, a need to tell their stories. Started in the cave with caveman drawings, cave persons drawing, whoever were drawing those drawings, um, carving them on the walls, their hunt, what they're eating, the dangers of life, prehistoric life. Um, so the desire to tell our story goes back long before Christianity or the Bible or civilized man or people who could read or write, but they could tell what a picture is. And they were telling these stories around the campfire. Greeks started storytelling many, many years ago, developed into a lot of great plays before modern times. We'll talk about that later, show you some examples later. But this need to tell a story was important. And of course, this is long before they had cameras, but they had something that they could depict a visual. And movies are visuals. They're not words. It's not literature. And that's really important. We had still photography that was happening, and then the movie camera was invented. Uh, Hopefully that DVD player works for me on Monday. I'll be showing you a documentary on the early cinema, how it came about, the technology that was available to them, and immediately, as soon as this technology is available, they started telling stories, really primitive, simplistic stories, human nature, human behavior, people riding horses, people walking, trains going by, dancers dancing. Like I said, there's one famous one is of a kiss. People never seen anything like it. Uh, it bothered a lot of people, bothered religious people because kissing should be private. But there it was. Someone filmed it. Get the camera out. Let's start filming. So the collective need to tell stories was very prominent, and they put it into motion. You look at the movie Trip to the Moon, they had to do a lot of technical stuff to make that happen. Paint sets, get actors, figure out the camera. Someone had to pay for it also. Of course, it wasn't like anything like the expense now. Um, so this need to tell a story goes back to the beginning of time. And early cinema is our story. It may not look like our world, but is it that different? Human nature really never changes. Yes, the fashions change, technology changes, but human nature doesn't change. We all want to have an interesting life. We want to have love. We want to have some sort of meaning in our life, success, maybe, if we're lucky. Same thing with the people who made that movie 120 years ago wanted. The discussions wouldn't be very much different, except for the language is a little different. Jean Luc Godard, the iconic French filmmaker, just died this last year, 90. Was making movies up until the day he died. We're going to cover a whole section on the French New Wave. You'll see it. It won't be for a while. And he's a part of that. And he had said many famous things. He's a raconteur and provocateur, and he knew his words had profound meaning, and it disturbed some people. That's good. People need to be disturbed. But one of his most famous things, he said, I'm going to finish this brief first lecture with, he said, everything is cinema. In fact, I've got his book right over there. It's called Everything is Cinema. If you care about movies, you should read it. Maybe you will one day in a grad level film class. What does that mean? Everything is cinema. Well, when he said it, 1960, 59, thereabouts, it seemed kind of crazy. It seemed like, oh, right, he's a crazy kooky artist. Everything obviously is in cinema. Me getting up in the morning, getting a shower, sitting on the toilet isn't exactly cinema. But think about what it means, especially now that we're in the YouTube and TikTok world. He wasn't that far off. He knew what he was talking about. The other thing he said was truth. Cinema is truth at 24 frames a second. Now, what does that mean? Well, cameras, movie cameras, not video cameras, but video cam or your cell phone, they 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 move through the camera at 24 frames a second. It goes by a shutter at 24 frames. Every second, 24 frames are exposed. Frames of film. It's how most movies were made up until recently when the digital world took over and our digital cameras shoot at a different frame rate. But 24 frames is what we see. It seems normal to our eyes. When you look at a silent film like The Trip to the Moon, their movements don't seem like the movements that we're used to. That's because they were shooting at 17 frames a second. It's a different world. They didn't have batteries or electricity cameras. They were hand cranking cameras like this. And they had an operator who had to hand crank the camera. And if he had a steady hand, it was came out at 17 frames a second. All silent films were made like that up until sound came in. That's why they're all kind of move funny and they're jerky. Um, I'll explain on Monday why that was and why it changed at 24 frames a second. The big hint is sound came in, and I'll talk about that later. I don't want to get into a bunch of technical stuff right now. Anyway, I hope you guys are digging the class. We're just digging in, we're just starting. I look forward to seeing you guys on Monday. Come in, be prepared to talk about that film. If you're not prepared, then I guess you'll be silent. I won't embarrass you by pointing at you, but I might. You never know. Um, anyway, so enjoy your weekend. No papers yet. I sign the first paper next week. I'll tell you what it is on Monday. Enjoy your weekend and remember, everything is cinema.